Good afternoon, N4A. My name is Marissa Edwards, and I currently serve as the Region 4 Director. I will be today's moderator for our presentation. On behalf of the N4A, its leadership, and community, I would like to welcome our participants to today's webinar. The webinar serves as our January installment of our 2021-22 webinar series. Our session today is entitled, "Do I Have to Choose? Parenting While Climbing the Professional Ladder." Before I introduce our presenters, I wanted to take a moment to remind participants that we will host a question and answer session at the conclusion of the presentation. Please feel free to use the Q&A feature throughout the course of the webinar to propose questions for our presenters. At this time, I'm excited to announce our presenters, Camelia Lanier and Jared Fries from Campbell University. At this time, I'm going to pass things over to our presenters to kick off today's webinar. The floor is yours, presenters.
Thank you, Marissa. Thank you again so much for joining us. A few things we're going to go over today is how to meet workplace obligations while showing up for your children, how to establish effective lines of communication, how to prioritize your family and career, and creating an accepting culture of supporting working parents.
All right, thank you all for joining us. We do want to talk about those things that Camelia just mentioned, but before jumping into thinking through how to balance the demands of a career and parenting, we think it's important to talk about purpose and knowing your why. You've got to do the work first of knowing yourself. That's step one to being able to bring your best, most authentic self to the workplace, as well as show up in that way for your family. So you've got to take time to reflect and decide on what's important to you and what your personal values are. This will give you a framework to negotiate these two significant parts of your identity. Starts with knowing why you do this work. I think this is a question we should all have an answer for, of why did we get into this in the first place? If you don't have that answer, I'd encourage you to start right there. And then second, you can't prioritize your commitment to your work and your family if you don't know what those priorities are, what matters to you. So every new part of your life requires a trade-off. I've heard it said, when you commit yourself to something, it limits what else you can do. So every yes requires a no. That's just part of the reality of parenting. That's a new addition that you've said yes to. That requires some no's in other areas. So another way to think about it is, how much of yourself are you willing to give to your career to move up the ladder? And the reverse of that is, what are you not willing to sacrifice for that success that you hope to achieve?
My name is Camelia Lanier, formerly known as Camelia Blake. I started working in athletics in 2009. During my journey through athletics, I've served as a compliance director, an academic coordinator, a senior women administrator, a SAC advisor, a life skills coordinator, an assistant athletic director, and a DEI liaison. One thing that has remained constant in my journey through athletics is my why. I want to impact and or motivate positive change in whatever role I'm serving. And the pictures shown are pictures of graduation, pictures of a community engagement event, and then of course you have to love the game. What I'm not willing to sacrifice. I will be married for 5 years to Benjamin come May. We have 2 sons, Luke, age 3, Cam, age 2. I started the industry straight out of undergrad, and the only responsibility I had was myself. So for majority of my career in athletics, I was single with no kids. That changed the moment I said I do. In the past 4 years in my career, my life has changed drastically, as so has my why. What I'm not willing to sacrifice for an opportunity is my family. I was on a podcast a few years ago with Monique Smith from Seeds of Empowerment, and I was asked, how did you manage to not only fall in love, but to get married while working in college athletics? And I remember responding, that was always the goal for me. Since I was a kid, I've always wanted to be married and have a husband. I grew up watching fairy tales. So everything else that I added to my plate of what I wanted to do, I added later on in life. But if you go back to your initial goal, your initial why, this is something I've always wanted. So it was a no-brainer for me to make sure I achieved that thing, if nothing else in my life.
And for myself, it took me some time to form my why, what I was looking for in a vocation, what I hope to achieve in a professional career. So through my college and grad school experiences and some opportunities I had to try some things in those contexts, I gained some clarity that I wanted to invest my work in students, college students, and then specifically student athletes. And what I hope that investment to look like was in the education context. I wanted to invest and participate in their experience while they're in college, which I think is them discovering who they are and then also deciding who they want to be once they're done with this college period of their life. And so that's been consistent as I've made choices in my career. Like Camellia, got pictures that represent that for me. These are students I worked with here at Campbell that I was a part of their journey from the time they arrived as freshmen to their graduation. These are all students from my first class here. So that captures and helps remind me of why I do this work. And I think what's important when thinking about the balance between family and work is the work matters too. It's not just that work is a job and my family is what's important. My work is important and my family is important. So this matters, the work that we're doing and the opportunity to get invested in these students. So it's trying to find a way for these not to compete with one another, but to work alongside. And then this is my family. So Tammy is my wife. We have two daughters that we love dearly, Layla and Abigail. They're 12 and 6. Tammy and I, college sweethearts, we met at Campbell University. We were both undergrad students here. She played volleyball, started dating way back when, went to graduate school together, and then got engaged shortly thereafter. We'll have been married 14 years in June. This is also my 14th year of working full-time in college student athlete support. So those have been simultaneous from my experience. I did not start in this field right away. I had a very brief tenure as a bank manager on campus at the University of Florida, where I went to graduate school. There was a bank in the student union. I managed that branch for a couple of years. Found a little bit of meaning there because I worked with students, so that was part of my goal. And there was a lot of education involved because they overdraft a lot and you have to teach them how that's a bad thing and how it costs them money. So I did a lot of that work, but overall, I did not find why and purpose that aligned with my goals in that work. This is what I wanted to do. The transition occurred for me when, like so many people, what caused change was a commitment to another person. Wanted to get married. My wife and I were engaged. She had started her career as a college volleyball coach, but that was in Tennessee. At East Tennessee State, I was in Gainesville. So I did not find what I was looking for in my vocation. So I gladly volunteered to quit my job, moved to Tennessee. We got married that summer in June in 08. And then shortly thereafter, I had my first opportunity in the field working as an academic advisor at East Tennessee State. So marriage has always been a part of the equation, the decision-making process. As evaluating career opportunities, it's always been a partnership for me from the very beginning. And then my wife also worked in athletics, so we had a similar understanding of what it would take and the possibility of moving multiple times, working long hours, non-traditional, that sort of thing. So we were connected there. Our first daughter, Layla, was born about 18 months after we got married. So early on in my career, I was a working professional, I was a husband, and then I was also a dad. And I was married to a coach, so I had a lot of responsibility when she was on the road. That was the nature of our relationship. But I'm ambitious. I think all of us are. We're competitive. That's why we do this work. We want to succeed. So I did want to have success in my career, but I want to be a good dad. I want to be a good husband. So a big part of what I'm not willing to sacrifice is what I value, which is my children and my wife knowing my presence at home and feeling valued, seen, and supported. So I want to have success in this vocation, but I don't want it to come at the expense of my children's experience or my wife's experience. So we want to give a brief overview of different types of the ways we parent, give some language to specific parenting styles. This is not an endorsement or a judgment of any of these. This is just a way to identify the way you interact with your children. If you've never thought about this, don't have language for it, you might see yourself in one of these. And then I think it needs to be said that our intention today is not to present about the reality of COVID, but COVID has been with us so long and has had such a significant impact on parenting and how we manage work and home and the blending of the two, that COVID will come up because it's had a big impact, especially, at least for myself and Camellia, with the ways we've parented and how it's changed our style. Sometimes for the better, sometimes we're not as proud of it. So COVID's a big part of this for this conversation. And we want you to think about your parenting style. So give a brief pause. How do you parent? What kind of parent are you? What kind of parent you want to be? I think all of us hope to be, our best days. That's the kind of parent to materialize. And then if you're not a parent, but you're hoping to be, consider what that would look like for you.
So the first style we'll speak on is authoritarian parent. This is a because I said so parent. For many of us, that's probably sounds very familiar. I know growing up, I felt like I had one of the strictest mothers in America. This style focuses on obedience, punishment over discipline. Nowadays, I watch a lot of animated TV. So a good example of this style is Queen Eleanor, who is Mildred's mother in the Pixar movie Brave. This is the style that she portrays through the movie. Next up is the authoritative parent. This style reasons with children instead of demanding blind obedience. It creates a positive relationship, enforces rules. Best example I got is Mary Poppins, if everyone remember Mary Poppins. Listens to children's, reasons with children instead of demanding blind obedience, so it's more of give and take relationship. So now let's talk about the permissive parent. The permissive parent doesn't enforce rules. They believe kids kind of will be kids. As you can tell, I watch a lot of movies. So a great example of this parenting style would be Big Daddy starring Adam Sandler. I think the movie came out about 1999. You can tell parents still love their children, but they don't set rules. So there's no boundaries. There's no nap time. There's no study time. There's no play time. It'll get done at some point, and they don't enforce it if it doesn't get done at that time. And the last parenting style we have is the uninvolved parent. And the uninvolved parent seems like it provides little guidance, little nurturing or attention. Speaking for myself, in 2020, being trapped, I'm saying trapped, in a house with a 1-year-old and a newborn, many times I felt overwhelmed trying to work and watch 2 kids. During that year, on the right day, I could have shown signs of all 4 parenting traits. And I can't tell you what's the best approach because studies have shown flaws in all of them as adults mature, as children mature. So I believe the right balance between styles during the development of the child makes a difference. And then understanding that you're not by yourself. And some days you're not going to be the authoritarian parent. And some days you may be the permissive parent. My kids still jump on the couch because during COVID, if they jumped on the couch, it was okay because I had to get work done. And now I can't really stop them from jumping on the couch. So now knowing the parenting styles, how to achieve success in both roles.
So we want to start by talking about practical ways to manage the demands of parenting and the demands at work. That's the big tension I think that all of us feel is, can I do both well? Or maybe can I do my job as well as I did when I didn't have this commitment at home and now I feel pulled 2 ways. So our goal is to provide some tips that are useful to you in your situation. I think situation, context, the department you work for, what the campus culture is where you're at and how permissive or welcoming or not to children, parents, that sort of thing, make a big difference. So it all is individualized. After we talk about these practical tips, we want to talk more big picture about career advancement, how to think through your goals and what a path that might look like for you that enables you to reach them while maintaining your commitment to your family that you hope to have. So I think parenting involves making choices about how to spend your time. And that's at the workplace. So when we think about managing the two, a big concern is how do we approach asking for maybe the time off that's needed, the different things that can be uncomfortable in the work environment where we don't want to be seen as not as committed as others, that we're not honoring what is required, that we're not all in. If we're asking for time away, we're concerned with what does that do to my impact or to my reputation at work. And so those are all real concerns that we all, I think, may have experienced. But I think to start with, before getting to the nuts and bolts of those conversations, is how do you show up at work? And to be able to have a good conversation with your supervisor around your needs as a parent, it all begins with establishing your credibility. your reputation is so important, and it's going to be based on how you've shown up in the workplace. If you're new to a job, this starts day one. And what you want to do is you want to earn the trust of your supervisor or coworkers. And the way you earn your trust or earn their trust, I think, is to do the things that people find trustworthy, right? You're an honest person. You operate with integrity. You do what you say you're going to do. They told you the expectations of the job when you accepted it, and you show up and are willing to meet those expectations with a positive attitude. You want to contribute in the ways that they told you would be required in that environment. So trust is key, because the following conversations, if you don't have children and you transition into a parenting role and your availability shifts, so what was easy for you to say yes to in the workplace now becomes more difficult, or you might have to say no, or can I do it a different way? If you've established your reputation and earned the trust of your supervisor, they're going to know that you're a valuable contributor to the department. You have these new responsibilities, and they want to support that effort. And a simple way to do that, this is not rocket science, is work hard. What message we don't want to communicate is that working hard means working all the time, working 60 hours a week, 80, whatever the crazy number is. That is kind of the feared nightmare of working in college athletics, where you never get a moment away from your phone and your email or contact with another person. I'm not suggesting working hard means being available 24/7 and working all the time. It means when you are at work, you're getting stuff done. You show up, you get right to your tasks as is appropriate, you accomplish the results that are needed for the role that you serve in, and you do that on a daily basis. So are you productive? Who are you when you're in the workplace? Whatever the norm is in your office for showing up in the morning, whatever is the expectation, you meet that. You're on time or even early. Do you follow through? So if something is asked of you and you commit to it, do you follow through with that commitment? Those things go all the way towards earning the trust by establishing that you are a hard worker, because that's what people want. And then also, what kind of work do you do? Is it good quality? Do you pay attention to detail? Do you care about the things that have your name on them that you have to contribute, whether that's a report that gets shared outside of just your own use. Maybe you're distributing communication in written or verbal form, or a presentation to coaching staffs, recruits, to your students, to fellow staff members. Is that work good? Is it accurate? Is the information something that can be relied on? Are you informed when you're responsible for knowing something and asked a question, you can give a good answer? I think if the quality of your work is strong, and you've already established that you have a committed work ethic to doing work well and showing up with a desire to be productive in the workplace, that again cements the trust, which is consistent. So everything that has your name on it has to be paid attention to, and you have to take that responsibility serious. And then, are you consistent? So are you that way the first month on the job, and then you start to fizzle out and it becomes a little bit more inconsistent? Some weeks you're great, you really shine bright, you have a good idea, you stand out among your peers, and then the next couple of weeks you miss a few deadlines, you're showing up later than you used to, that sort of thing. So be a hard worker who has integrity and honesty to establish that trust, produce good work, and then do it all the time. And one thing that Camelia and I discussed in this idea is, not only does this matter just for negotiating the needs of a parent, you need to be credible, but in considering we're talking about career advancement and moving forward with new opportunities, a real possibility for all of us is that your opportunity might be at the workplace you're currently at. So this reputation that you've established, when that new role or a role has an opening and it's something you aspire to and you think you're qualified and hopefully ready for, the reputation you've built over your time at that institution with your coworkers, with your supervisor, and even those across the department that you come into contact with that you don't have a direct responsibility to, that's going to play the biggest factor in whether they decide to consider you for that position or not. And Camelia and I are both examples of finding that opportunity here at Campbell. We came in with different roles than we have now and advanced a couple times. I'll speak from my situation of, I was moved into an interim role in my current role initially. And I know because this was part of our conversation, but our athletic director when considering that move to fill a role, he asked the rest of our staff what they thought of me in that leadership position. And my understanding is that the feedback was positive, and that was a big step towards moving into this role and being given this trust. So not only is it important to negotiate the needs of your parenting life, but also if you want to advance and you want to move forward, it might be right at home. I think there's many of us probably who are participating today that have moved into the roles that we might have desired without having to move institutions. And committee, you don't want to speak to that?
Yes, so credibility is everything. And as Jared said, we almost come as a package deal. So when one of us move up, the other one has always moved up. And the important part about that is because we were colleagues, we watched how the other worked, not even intentionally, because we don't work with the same teams, but Jared saw me get to work on time. I saw Jared get to work on time. I saw all Jared kids eligible. He saw all of my kids eligible. He saw the relationship I had with my coaches and my players, as well as staff across campus, as well as I saw that with him. And so being Jared's number 2 was a no-brainer, because it's just like, he trusts that I'm going to get my work done because I've already put in the time, and honestly put in the time when I didn't believe someone was really watching me. So now when you're in the role, sometimes you have to consider that when Jared said you're going to sometimes move up where you are, who around you is going to move up before you. And then if they move up before you, are they going to also think like, oh, this person has done a great job. They're always on time. They always get their work done. Their stuff is always accurate, correct. It's key. It's important, especially if you're moving up at your same location. So when someone looks down and when it's your time to be promoted, someone can always know that you're their person, you're their girl, you're their guy.
Okay, so if you've established your trust in the department, your supervisor finds you trustworthy and you have a good reputation, then the most important thing is communication. I think dealing with the demands of parenting in a nuts and bolts way, it's going to require you to be pulled away at times. And so communication is the most important part of this going well. It's crucial to ensuring that the disruptions, interruptions, I'll call them that, they sound kind of negative, but that's what parenting issues can be during the workday, is it disrupts what you have planned and interrupts what you have going on. So those disruptions and interruptions are managed as smoothly as possible if good communication is in place. So in practical terms, I think that we can categorize the disruptions and interruptions that we experience as parents that affect our day-to-day productivity into 2 groups. There's the events you know about and plan for and put on your calendar. And those examples I think of are doctor's appointments, your 1-year checkup, your 2-year, those sorts of things, a physical for school, whatever it may be. Maternity and paternity leave, while you may not know the exact date that starts, you have an idea of the length of time in advance, that sort of thing. And then there's kids' activities, sports, what are they participating in, dance, band, things that are consistently scheduled, or even just what time daycare closes, because that can affect what time you need to leave from work to be able to pick up your child on time, or school gets out, that sort of thing. So those are the planned, quote, interruptions or disruptions that come along. And then there's the surprises. The surprises are the urgent things that need your attention immediately because it's a crisis of some sort involving your child, and you do not have a lot of time to make a decision or to get things in order before you might be absent from the office and or unable to go in. And I think of experiences we've had. You wake up and your child has 101 fever and someone's got to stay home that day, you or your partner, whoever your support system is, or daycare or your school calls and your child's been throwing up. And so you need to come pick them up right away because they're sick and they need doctor's attention, or they need to go home. They can't be in that environment anymore, especially right now with COVID, right? Like there's a sensitivity towards any sort of sniffles. So you may be called quickly. And then in my own life, I'm thinking about this semester, we had a bomb threat that was called in as a prank at my daughter's middle school. So as I was dropping her off, I quickly went back home and changed our whole morning plans. That was definitely unexpected. And then this week for myself, our children had the holiday on Monday, went to school on Tuesday. We are in person here in North Carolina. And then on Wednesday or Tuesday afternoon, they announced we're virtual for the rest of this week. So my wife and I did not have that in our plans for this week to have our children at home. So that required a quick adjustment. Fortunately for me, my wife was able to work from home, so she's carrying that load this week. But these are very real things that are going to happen. They're not an if, it's a when. And so communication is important to managing that in the workplace, to making sure everything goes as it should. And that starts with your supervisor. What's your relationship there? I think it starts with understanding the expectations of the staff at your department. When are you expected to be there? How long are you expected to stay? Is there flexibility for virtual work? Those sorts of things that can affect your planning and what you need to do to be there for your children, your family, and be there at work. If that hasn't already been established in your office and it's understood and communicated, and maybe it's part of your policies and procedures, or it's talked about, then schedule a time to ask your supervisor how this will work for you. Because you don't want to work off of assumptions and then you're being evaluated in a way that you didn't realize and they thought you were poorly performing and you didn't realize you were not adhering to what was expected. So sit down, talk with your supervisor and talk through how they would like you to communicate and manage when certain situations may arise. So I think it's really important to identify those conflicts, problem solve on the front end. And some of that is if they tell you this is the time to be in the office and that didn't fit into what you had planned, you may need to change your plans at home to accommodate the work expectations, because that's your work context. And then some of it may be something that can be solved in the work end. Maybe your supervisor is flexible, your work environment, where if you come in earlier, maybe you can leave a little bit earlier, and that fits your home life better. And everybody's good with that as long as you're still meeting with your students and available for staff meetings or whatever is required of you where you're at. So those are some of the planned fixed things be ready for. And then for the surprises, you want to talk through with your supervisor how to manage that before it happens. So ask them how they would want you to communicate to them what's going on, how to deliver it. And then I think you want to share the info when you have it. So as soon as you know something that requires your action, try and get that message to your supervisor so that they can be informed. And I think this is the best practice. I know it helps me as a supervisor is I appreciate the conversation for the urgent in the moment situations. Camelia and I have a great relationship with that. Another member of our staff, we're half and half parents here at Campbell, the 6 of us. So that's worked well. But I also like to follow up in some form of writing. And even if that's just putting it on the calendar that she's out of the office because daycare closed because of COVID situation and she's got to be working remote, which we're able to do here. But if it's on the calendar, then I don't have to remember the details and I can go back and be informed again without having to reach Camelia directly and asking her to repeat herself. And I think that's important.
One thing that we also do here at Campbell, we use a shared calendar. And that has helped me as a planner keep Jared informed of what's going on. So anytime Luke or Cam has a doctor's appointment, it's on the shared calendar. So I said it, I'm going to be gone from this time to this time. And if they have one of those 3 months or 6 months where they have to have shots, I'm going to be off this day because the kids may have a fever. So it's all on the shared calendar. I not only send it to Jared, I also send it to the remainder of the staff, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But then, so he knows Friday that Camelia is going to be off because Luke has a doctor's appointment. Or on March 26th, Luke is turning 3, so Camelia is going to take off. So I have to get Luke a gift. I'm just kidding. So it's helped us. And then honestly, at first it may seem like, oh, it's invasive. You're sharing your personal moments with your supervisor. But honestly, it's allowing your supervisor to allow you to be off. It's allowing, meaning off and no one's calling your phone, needing something or requesting something, because it's just like, she has something going on. I've known about this for a month now. If I needed something prior to this week, I had time to communicate that with her, get that information with her, and move forward. So communicating with your supervisor to make sure that they know what's going on so that they can actually humanize with you and understand that you have a life outside of work. But that also does tie back to having that credibility, having that relationship so they can trust that your work will get done and no one feels like they're, taking on the butt of the load. But also in communicating with your supervisor, you have to now also communicate with your partner. And for me, like I said, starting out in the industry completely single to now being married with kids, it was easy when it was just me and my husband. And then shortly after having the kids, a lot of times I signed up for stuff because I'm a planner and I put like, if case of emergency, contact me, in case of emergency, contact me. So I could be on the way home and he's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, oh, well, it's closing early. Because he doesn't get he may not get the notification. So making sure your partner also too has all the information And then also one for me is still, I guess, a newlywed because we hit 5 years this year. I know in the beginning with Luke, I took on like gender roles, feeling like, oh, I had to be the person to do this, or I had to be the person to do that. And then having a conversation with my husband, and he was like, why do you feel you have to do any of that? I was just like, well, because I thought I was the person. He's like, no, if you give me the information, we'll set up a time and we'll split the load. Like, this is a team, but I can't operate as a team if you're the only person with the information. So making sure you're actually having those honest and open conversations with your husband or your wife, to make sure both parties understand what's going on and what needs to be done, so the job can also get done at home. What about you, Jared?
Yes. So the communication with your partner, your support system that you rely on to help you with your children is just as important. It's great to have perfect communication at work and everybody's on the same page, but you don't want to bring tension back home, right? Because this is about a balance between the two and valuing all parts of yourself. So valuing your partner, your support system, just as much as you value your reputation and everything at work, which I think this is one of those that we all understand, but it's easy to let go because you just get busy. And what I found as a parent that shifted from just being married was you become a lot more task oriented especially as their children hit school age, like this stuff just needs to get done today. So there's less communication and more doing because there's a lot on the calendar. And so the communication can slip. For my wife and I think what early on with our first child, especially with Layla, for the first two institutions we worked at the same school in the same athletic department, and literally our offices were down the hall from each other. So it was very easy to get up out of an office and walk, the 20 seconds to her office and ask a question. She was very accessible. Home was very close by and daycare was very close by. So our world was small and easy to get in touch with. And it was that way for a long time. And even when we worked at two different institutions, the last place before here, we had one child at the time and she worked farther away from daycare in our home than I did. So our roles were pretty clear. I picked up from daycare every day because it was feasible. So there wasn't a lot of discussion around that. It was just do it. And when she was coaching and, she was going to be gone on the dates of competition, recruiting dates, and camps and things in the summer, it was just understood that I would be at home with our daughter and those because I had that space and she didn't. What became complicated for us was my wife now works in a different role and we don't work in the same institution anymore or in the same area. She's an hour away from her job. So our home is an hour away from her job, which means we have to be on the same page when we're not accessible to one another. And so our communication had to go and our planning had to go from informal, easy to talk to formalized, which I was the problem here because I don't like to look too far down the road. If people want to talk about, if my wife wants to bring up summer vacation now, I don't want to discuss July, August. We got stuff between now and then. Well, we sat down at the beginning of January and we put on a shared calendar every commitment we had between January and June because there were commitments through that whole period for both of us, both professional mostly, but there were a few personal items. So we put it all on there and we shared it. So now we can access commitments without having to talk to each other each time to remember. And then trying to touch base on a weekly basis of what's coming up this week. And this week is a perfect example of just a busy week for us for a variety of reasons. And so it became a lot more important to do it in an official capacity that felt a little bit more like a work environment, but it's helped at home, I think, for us to understand. And then I think part of it is hearing each other because both sides of this are driven in their careers and want to be successful and we're committed to our work. So it's important to us to show up for the things we need to show up to. So being able to be on the same page to allow both of us to commit to the things we need to do without it being a source of tension or conflict is really important to both of us feeling valued as working professionals while taking care of the needs at home. And then we want to include the children in the communication conversation. So I don't think it's reasonable to say if you work in college athletics, you can just always be there whenever they want. You're going to work nights, you're going to work weekends sometimes, you might travel as part of your responsibility. I do with our men's basketball team here. So there's going to be times when you're not just able to be there as a natural part of our job. I don't think that's problematic if it doesn't overwhelm, if you're able to have an ebb and flow. And then some of our work is seasonal. The beginning of the semester is generally a very busy time and I might work later or go in earlier. So having age appropriate conversations with your children to tell them what you have going on and that you won't be available, and then following up with when you will be available, I think helps to build that relationship. Children are pretty understanding, and they're going to believe it's normal, whatever you've set out for them. I think this also makes sure that they know that they're an important part of the conversation, that they're seen and heard, and it matters how they feel. And by telling them something, that gives them a chance to process information. So like I said, this week was busy for us. Last weekend, my wife had a volleyball club tournament. That's what the club she works at. So she was gone all weekend. She came home late Monday. I went left for work early Tuesday, told the girls goodbye, and went on a trip with basketball, got back late last night, and then came back. So my wife and I haven't had a proper conversation outside of a short lunch and, since last Thursday, a week ago. And which means our kids didn't have much of us together either. And we both worked a lot this week. So telling our children this is the agenda for this week. It's going to be very busy. Daddy or mommy are going to be gone on these days, or just busy, taking work at home. But on Saturday, we'll all have time for each other. I think that causes us to find that time for them and then to make a commitment. But I think it's important that when we tell them when we're available for them, that we show up for them, because children do care about that, right? They take you at your word. But I think children are flexible and resilient. And in our household, they don't really flinch if one of us is going to be gone overnight or even several nights, because it's just a common occurrence, and they know it will happen, and we try to be there for them whenever we are able to be there for them. And Camilla, you were going to share about your experience.
And so, as you all well, my kids are 2 and 3. So where we are at our development is I just try to be present when I'm present. So if I just got home from work and they want to go outside and jump on a trampoline, we're all going to go outside and jump on a trampoline. If they want to watch a movie for the 7th time in this week, we're going to watch that movie, and I'm going to be equally as excited about that movie for the 7th time. I think it's fair to have age appropriate conversations. I don't think my kids are at the age where they completely understand that I'm going to be gone or I'm going to come back. So what I have learned is when I'm there, as long as mommy's there and she's not on the phone and she looks engaged and she looks happy, they're happy. So that has worked well for us. I will say, moving on to working with our colleagues, that was a harder transition for me, because it was like, okay, I'm letting my supervisor know. Now I got to let everybody else know. And then when I took a moment back for myself, realizing that with football, I work directly with another person. That person needs to know, like, I'm going to be gone. You may have to pick up the slack. You may have to pick this presentation. So like I said earlier, when I share that calendar with Jared, I include anybody that I work with and everybody that I work with. So they know, like, hey, I'm going to be at the office during this time, or I'm going to be unavailable, or even I'm going to be working from home. So the dynamics of that conversation or that call or that meeting may look different from wherever location I'm at, but they understand that I am keeping them aware. And when you think about it, this is the same thing as you ask of your students. So you ask your students, if you're running late for our meeting, send me a text, let me know you're running late. If you're not going to be able to make it because something happened, let me know. And I feel like we ask this of our students, but we need to remind ourselves, if we ask this of ourselves, it helps our coworkers and our supervisor humanize with us. And I think it's worked well in our department. I guess Jared can speak on it more.
I just want to echo what Camelia said, that include your colleagues and the impacts on them. If they rely on something that you contribute to the department that serves the wider group, letting them know how you're either going to be available to get that done, or when you're available to them if they need you, or what the alternate is if you're not available, so that the work still continues. Because if they're relying on you to be good at their jobs, if you're pulled away for good reason for your family, you don't want that to then prevent success for others who don't have that experience and don't have that obligation. Just to maintain, because I think we're talking specifically about how do we support parents in this way, but it's about being a supportive culture for the department overall. We don't want those without children to feel like they're taken advantage of, and those of us with children get an excuse and an exemption to walk away from work to deal with personal items. So finding ways to make sure that your colleagues feel supported and able to do their jobs well if they depend on you is really important. And then how do you do it? I think the fear of the two, of being committed to your family and showing up for them, is that you won't be as good at your job as you were before, because maybe you just put a lot of time into it. So you don't want to see a decline as a result of having children. And I think what this requires is taking some time to do some reflecting and planning. So doing more planning ahead. So I know if you don't have others to depend on, a solution that may be to a work overload is I'm just going to stay here till I get it done. We're hardworking. Like, our field is hardworking. We're competitive, take pride in what we do. We want to be the best at it. We want to be good at it. And we care about the students and the people we serve. So we don't want to let a ball drop. So there's a can-do attitude of like, I'll stay here till I need to. But if daycare closes at 5:30 and you got to go, that's no longer the solution that you can implement. And maybe you don't want to take work home to get it done, because then that's taking away or interfering with your family time. So I think planning ahead for what you need to do, distilling it down into what are the essentials of my job, what are the real core factors that impact my students in a meaningful way, that make the difference for them, that meet the expectations that have been placed on me by my department and my supervisor that I'm being evaluated by. And then start with those building blocks. And then you fill in around that with all of the ideas you have and your creative juices of how I would like to get bigger and better. But in my experience, there's always a list of more things I can do than I ever get to. So not feeling defeated that you aren't accomplishing every idea that you've ever come up with. If you're getting the core functions of your job done and you're doing it well, and your students are being served and they're having as good of an experience as you can impact, they're graduating, they're feeling seen, heard, valued, and supported, I think you're doing your job well, even if you're not doing everything that you thought of you could do in the workplace. So taking the time to decide what are the critical pieces of my job and how can I do those, and then using tools to get better at it. Like our students, I think sometimes we may be overwhelmed because we have a mental idea of the load of responsibility, and we need to put it down into something. We need to make a list, a to-do list, a task list, calendar it out with due dates of things that are upcoming. So when you can see the workload, you can manage the workload and you can come up with a plan to do that. And then just being smart about it to be more efficient. Build templates out if you repeat yourself. If you send a similar email at the beginning of the semester to students and you haven't saved some version of that so you can tweak it, then I would suggest start doing that. Save things that you reuse so that you can edit them as needed, but don't start over from zero every time. So as much of that sort of work that we can do, where it's like, I have the base foundation, I just need to make it fit right now, that saves time. Everything you can do to be more efficient is going to be important. Becoming as expert as you can as efficiency will free up the space, or at least get the list completed in a day when you think you don't have enough time. And then just recognizing that you're a different worker than you were when you didn't have children. So you might have to rethink your approach because you don't have the same options available to you to solve problems. So choosing a new method, getting creative. And I think, again, to reference COVID, for all of what we don't like about COVID, which is basically all of it, what it has created for us is an understanding or recognizing or even awareness that we can do our jobs in ways that we didn't think was possible a few years ago. And I'm not suggesting move everything virtual as a solution. I'm saying use that sort of thinking that said, oh, I thought this was a fixed way of doing it, and then I learned there's another way. Because by and large, what I've observed and heard is we succeeded at changing and adapting. We still were able to serve students in the way we needed to. So build off that confidence that I'm a pro in adjusting to new context, new situations, and I can do this differently, but still do it well because we've had practice. And then having solutions in place. Don't be surprised by the unexpected. We've already talked about it a little bit, but your kids are going to get sick. Schools are going to close. You're going to have a snowstorm. Things are going to happen that are going to interfere with what you need to do. And to go with the John Wooden quote, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. So think about how you need to manage those things that you know will happen, even if you don't know when they will occur, that are going to take you away from work. And I think a parenting analogy that if we have children we've experienced is when you're preparing for the arrival of your child, you have a plan in place, even though you don't know the day or the hour where you're going to execute it. You've got the bag packed, you know the route to the hospital, you know where to check in, you might have even done a trial run. So we've got some background in doing this. Think through how you would need to execute it if you have to go in a hurry, and then put that in place. And some of it's simple practices, I think, like bring your laptop home if you have that, just in case your child wakes up with a fever the next morning, so you don't have to negotiate that problem. And then do your part to provide these solutions, so that when you have to go, it's not your supervisor giving you the map on how you're going to maintain your success. It's come up with a solution, Communicate again to your supervisor when these situations occur, this is how I plan to operate. And then remind that supervisor that you've talked it through, you have a solution that's going to work out. And I think you need two solutions because there's two things that pull us out of the office. You may be asked to come pick up your child and they're sick and they need your attention and you've got to be present for them and you can't work. That's got to be one plan when you're unavailable. But then sometimes it's the teacher's out because of COVID and so the whole class is shut down because they don't have a substitute. I've experienced that. So your child's fine, you're fine, you're just going to work from home if that's an option for you. So and I think this is true. This isn't a parenting thing. This is everybody could be absent from work for either a personal reason or their own personal illness. So there needs to be a contingency when you're not there of how the work will continue because there's students counting on us and others around us who need the production to continue. You good? Oh, sorry. And then the last thing is practice what you preach. We do this as a living. All of us have had a student come in, tell us they're overwhelmed. They have too much responsibility and they can't get it all done. So we've practiced this sort of inventory taking. What tools are you using to manage it? How are you planning it? Are you doing it the most efficient way? Did you identify the most important things and get those done first? We've got a framework for doing this work. Just do it to yourself. So when you feel overwhelmed and you say, I cannot do it all, walk through those steps as if that student walked through the door. And then I would also say, take it all the way to sometimes the answer we might give to the student is you're trying to do too much. You have too much on your plate and something needs to be removed. And give yourself the same grace and look at yourself if that's reality for you, the same way you would for the student. What we don't tell the student is you need to be tougher, suck it up and find a way. We don't tell a student they're a failure if they can't handle responsibilities that are greater than they're able to be successful at. We're kind to them, we're gracious to them. We tell them how this is in their best interest, and we tell them to back up a little bit. That may be the solution for you, that there may be something you need to remove from your plate because we might have a superhero mentality and feel good about ourselves if we're trying to do everything, but that's not going to help us in the long run. And then don't do it alone. Build your support system. Find somebody in the business that has similar goals to you or has attained the goal that you want to get to, whether it's a position, a place, who has a relevant family situation that you can look to as an example and then look up to. Personally, for me, Bob Baker was my very first boss in this business. He's now the senior associate AD at Ole Miss. He's a father of two girls like me, married. And he's been very successful in the career. I was able to work closely with him. I wasn't watching him for this. I was just around him. And now at my station in life, I look back and see what a great example he was for me now. And I try to tell him as often as I can. I think it's important to let him know that. But look up to those who have done it and then follow their example, listen for their advice. You're not the first one navigating this.
And also have a role model that models what you say you want to do. So saying I want to be an athletic director, my model was Peggy Davis. She had 2 kids. She was a successful athletic director. She was a successful parent. She was a successful wife. So all of that was important. Also, because of COVID, reaching out to colleagues, letting them know like you need help, asking them questions about certain things. And when I mean colleagues, I mean like friends in the industry that also have kids, that are also parenting during COVID, just so you know you're not making, you feel some kind of confidence that someone else is agreeing with the decisions you're making.
I agree. And I read a quote this week that jumped out to me that said, life hands us a challenging syllabus. We need all the help we can get. So use your support system. Some of the most meaningful things to me as a parent in this work were some offhanded comments by co-workers who were encouraging, who didn't know what they were doing. But I remember when our first child was born, trying to figure out how we're going to pay for daycare and literally being scared of that reality and not knowing how it was going to work. And a fellow colleague who was a coach just looked at me and my wife and was like, I don't know, you won't have any money, but you'll figure it out because if it's cold and your kid needs a coat, you're going to get them a coat. And that wasn't a solution. It wasn't a tip. It wasn't a how-to, but it was just really affirming that like, oh, okay, it's going to work out. This is our first go round. We've never done it. So connecting with others who can encourage you and tell you it's going to be okay, who can sympathize with you and then give you advice. And there's opportunities in N4A. I would say go there. There's committees you might be participating in. There's direct people there. I know there's been the group at conventions of working moms. I think Kristen Resvolt has organized. show up for that. If that's who you are, reach out to these other people who are doing what you do. And then last, be kind to yourself. You matter. Parenting is hard, and that doesn't really have anything to do with working in college athletics. Parenting is hard. So we do the work we want to do because we want to help. So we give a lot of ourselves at work. We want to do that at home, and that's not an easy path. So it will be hard. It will be difficult. You are not alone in that. So find some time for yourself to rest, to re-energize and recover, because this is a long haul event, right? Our kids are with us 24/7 for years and years and years, which is great. But it is, if you were trying to max out your capacity every day, you won't make it.
So you matter. And that's it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Oh, sorry.
Last thing is just building a supportive culture. I just want to say a brief word to supervisors. It's up to you. If parents don't feel valued in your workplace, you have authority, you have a voice, and you set the tone. The way you respond to the demands of a parent make all the difference in the world. I feel like this is an evergreen conversation of why, is it compatible working in college athletics and parenting? So we can either accept it or we could change it. I feel like we have a lot of bright, energetic young folks who burn out because they shine bright and then they get tired and they can't do it and they don't think it can be done. And so they exit, and we don't want that to happen. And then be selective as you choose your opportunities. Find one that's a fit for you. There may be a good job and it's not a good job for you, and that's okay. There may be a job that you'd love to have, but it demands more than you're willing to give, so you don't need that. That's also okay. Find the jobs that fit your values, that allow you to serve the students the way you want, live out who you are, and still work hard and be successful. And then keeping the big picture in mind. I think this gets missed real quick. If you start in this field in your 20s, let's say, and you stay in it for a career until retirement age around 65-ish, that's 40 years to accomplish your career goals. We see the D1 ticker, and it's a lot of young folks, and I think a lot of us look, are they older or younger than me? Do they have more years of experience or less years of experience? And we feel like it's a race. There is no race. It's a journey. And if you get to your destination, it doesn't matter how fast you got there. And so it's okay to me, and I think healthy, to have a seasonal approach, that climbing fast and hard on the professional ladder may be too much when you have a commitment to your children at home, but there won't always be small children at home, and you might be able to give more of yourself to that. So having that patience and long-term view that there is plenty of time, because what we want to express is you may not be able to do it all at the same time, but you probably can do it all if you give yourself the time to focus in different ways when it's appropriate. Focus on your children when that's most important. When you have the space to focus on your career, give it to that.
Thank you this time, for real.
Thank you, Camelia and Jared, for sharing your story, insight, and phenomenal information with our participants. At this time, we will answer some questions. How do gender roles play a part in your parenting styles?
For me, initially, like I said in the presentation, I thought as the woman, I was supposed to do the cooking, the cleaning, changing all the diapers, and having that conversation with my husband, realized I didn't have to do that. Now I do the cooking because he can't cook, but not because I have to cook. So actually, gender roles, we don't really do off gender roles. We work as a team, but we work as a team because we've had the conversation and we realized what is each other's strong suit. So if I'm a better planner, I do majority of the planning in my family. So that's how it has worked in my family. What about you, Jared?
I think similar to your experience, I would say that I felt like I'm willing to help, but I don't know what's going on. My wife also took on a lot of responsibilities, possibly as a woman and mother, that I didn't realize she was feeling that pressure to do it. And so I wasn't as actively trying to carry the load in certain ways that I could have been, because I wasn't paying close enough attention. So I think for myself as a father, lack of awareness and ignorant bliss of like, oh, everything's fine. And looking at my wife like, oh, she's a superstar, she can handle it, when maybe she can because she's great and is a strong woman. But why does she need to do so much? And she's exhausted by getting the work done, and I'm not, because I'm enjoying the fun part of being a dad, but not necessarily doing all of the harder things. And so it's taken me a long time to learn this. A slow learner in this area of being more perceptive, to ask better questions, to ask where I can contribute, and to make sure that I'm trying instead of waiting for her to ask.
Our last question is, how did maternity and paternity leave affect your job tasks and responsibilities once returning?
Well, my first pregnancy, I got preeclampsia. So I was in work that week, and then I left for the weekend. They're like, oh yeah, we're going to take the baby, so we're going to have to induce you. So I didn't have a lot of time of planning. So that one was more phone calls. With Cam, I actually set time to send out an email, let everybody know who was going to be in charge of what. So I had time to kind of plan for that one. But coming back to work, when I first came back to work, I felt I was behind in terms of me, because I'm a type of person that like to know everything about everything. So like trying to build a relationship with the students that had just came in that semester, trying to get to know them, getting to figure out where they are, what they need, because you can look at a schedule and then find out, oh, he's not good he struggles in math, or he struggles in English, or this person needs a tutor. Getting that workload back for me was hard, but it was doable. I did it twice. I got kids eligible twice, so it can be done. But just, I think if you come in with the mindset that figure out the right questions to ask, so when you come back, you know what you need to know, opposed to just thinking you're going to go back in it and it's just going to just pick up where you left off.
For me, this is tied, I think, to the last question of I made a mistake. I was not home long enough, especially with our first child. I was unaware of the value of me being home and how I could contribute. So I only took a week off the first time. And I think 2 weeks, it's been a while with our second daughter, I would have taken more time to be at home. Those experiences feel long in the moment. They're short when you look back, but they're valuable. It's a great way that you can be a partner and help in a meaningful way. And at the time I worked at state institutions, I had the leave. That was not the issue. It was me not recognizing the value of being at home as a father. So I thought I should just go back to work because I won't have much to do. And I was foolish in that I encourage other fathers to take their time and go home.
Great, thank you. Do you have any final remarks for our participants? Great. On behalf of N4A and its leadership, thank you to our wonderful presenters and to our participants for taking the time to join today's session. Our next webinar will be on February 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That concludes our presentation. Have a great day, everyone.